Well, welcome to today's webinar, the first in a series on fulfilling the promise of ag biologicals. And we're going to focus today's topic discussion on shelf life, specifically how we can improve shelf life of living microbial products. My name is Jane Fife. I'm Chief Technical Officer at 3Bar Biologics, the sponsor of today's webinar, and I'll serve as moderator of the panel discussion. And I'm joined by three amazing experts in their field, each coming to today's webinar with a little bit different perspective on what shelf life means to them and their roles, starting with formulation in the laboratory to scale up in manufacturing, and then through the distribution channel to the farm gate. So we should have a really interesting discussion from all these different perspectives. So I'm going to briefly introduce each of our panelists, and then they're going to introduce themselves in a little bit more detail. But let's start with Inish Rocha, who is a bioformulation leader at Battelle. We also have Scott Carter, who's Vice President of Microbials Research at Phibro, and Matt Meisner, Vice President of Research and Development and Data Science at Farmers Business Network. So first of all, thank you to each of you for joining in this webinar. It's great to have you with us. Before we get into introductions, a little bit more detail, I did want to cover a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, so we will have a link available after today. We're also live streaming on LinkedIn, which is a first, so that's pretty cool. And then we'll also have questions and Q&A session at the end of the webinar for all the participants. So if you want to ask a question, please do that in the chat box, and you can submit a question at any time. We'll take those at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to have, first of all, have Inish, if you want to introduce yourself briefly and maybe comment on what shelf life looks like to you in the laboratory as you're developing a new bioformulation.
So good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I want to thank 3Bar Biologicals for the invitation to be here today and to be part of this discussion, and of course to everyone that is attending this webinar. About myself, my name is Inish. I'm one of the researchers at Battelle UK. I joined Battelle 2 years ago, where I have been responsible for the bioformulation development and optimization for our clients-based projects, and also for creating different lines of projects for our internal research and development. About the topic that brings us here today, shelf life, I think the term itself is very broad in a perspective of formulation. Well, what I can say is you can have the best microbe in the world in terms of beneficial effects, but the truth is if you don't stabilize it, you can't sell it. So I think formulation is important in that sense, that it helps you to guarantee to achieve that stabilization, and also, as important, efficiency. So as formulators, what we look at is basically extending that survivability of the microbes in different storage conditions, of course, and we mention not only temperatures, but humidity and others, and by selecting maybe different types of formulations that are the most adequate to the type of active ingredient, but also what kind of market is going, where with the type of market where it's going to be sold. And well, to do this, you also have to ensure that your microbe has to be applied efficiently and taking into consideration all the methods. So shelf life for us is the whole thing. It's about having your microbe alive, but then not only during storage, but also after application, and in the sense that it can have the minimum for becoming profitable for our clients.
Great, thank you so much for that introduction. It's a lot of things to think about when you start with the formulation. Scott, if you could go ahead and briefly introduce yourself and maybe comment on how shelf life impacts manufacturers when you're thinking about scaling up and producing their product.
Sure, yeah, happy to. Again, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. My name is Scott Carter. I am the Vice President of the microbials business for Phibro. Phibro is nominally an animal health company, but we work in a variety of different technology spaces. I spent my whole career in the application of biotechnology to solving industry problems in agriculture. So with our microbials business, we work in animal health solutions, we work in plant health solutions and applications, we work in environmental and home applications of microbes, as well as a lot of contract manufacturing of microbes as well. So we're kind of running the gamut for that microbial business at Phibro. And, you know, Nish made a lot of great points about shelf life that I would also agree with. If I had anything to add there, it would be from a manufacturing perspective. We don't think enough about it. And when I say we, maybe not me on the manufacturing side, but when somebody is thinking about commercializing microbes for industrial applications, we just don't think enough about it. We don't think enough about how it's going to impact our supply chain or our cost structure or the complexity of manufacturing, all of those kinds of things. You know, you tend to engage in that project, maybe a marketing person or a salesperson engages in that project from an assumption. Oh yeah, shelf life will be fine. Let's just go forward. And there's so much that we're leaving on the table by not thinking about this in more detail.
Yeah, for sure. Last but not least, Matt, you can go ahead, introduce yourself and comment on how the distribution channels see the issue of microbials and shelf life.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Really appreciate the time and chance to be here today. So good to meet everyone. My name is Matt. I work with Farmers Business Network, FBN. I lead our data science and R&D efforts. Data science is really our team that focuses on analyzing a lot of data that FBN captures from our farmer members and analyzes to help them understand product performance, make agronomic decisions, you know, operate their farm, things like that. So it's one part of the FBN business. Another large part of the FBN business is FBN Direct, which is a direct-to-farm e-commerce platform for crop inputs, spanning crop protection, seed, increasingly biologicals, which we're really excited about. Though, as alluded to, as Jane mentioned, you know, there are some challenges there that we'll touch on just a second. And I lead our R&D efforts focused on vetting out new technologies, doing field trials of new inputs that we're considering commercializing through FBN Direct. You know, when it comes to thinking about shelf life and microbial products, right, I think we're definitely long-term, I think very bullish on the space, right? I think we see a ton of potential for microbials in ag. We see a ton of interest from growers who are hearing a lot about them, are very excited and see a lot of potential. I think the shelf life question is really, really critical and I think underappreciated for, I think, two reasons, right? I think first of all, from the most core perspective, from the farmer's perspective, right, farmers want to know that what they're buying is going to work, right? And if it's not alive when it gets there, or is not in a formulation where it's going to survive long in the field, or when it's applied to the crop, you're not going to get that efficacy, right? And I think farmers really have heard a lot about this space, but they want to know that what they're getting is real. And there's so much discussion that having the confidence when you talk about these products to farmers to have really solid data that this product is alive and going to work is really, really critical for building farmer adoption. And then I think second, from the distributor perspective, right, there's obviously a lot of differences in between selling a living product and selling a lot of the inputs that ag retail has sold for decades, right? Fertilizer, crop protection, shelf life concerns are not zero, but they're relatively small, right? I mean, these things can last for a long time. And when you think about logistics infrastructure needed, supply chain tracking of where things are, where they've come from, what conditions they've been exposed to, what write-off is likely to be at the end of a year, those are all really, really important when a retailer is considering, you know, what's the ROI and investment level needed to be successful in what's still a relatively new category for, at least for a lot of retailers. So yeah, very important topic and looking forward to the discussion today.
Right. Great. Thank you to each of you for those introductions. We're going to dive right into the problem and talk about just defining, you know, is it really a problem? What's driving, the problems behind achieving a good shelf life. So if maybe, Matt, we can start with the farmer in mind and work backwards through the value chain. But if you don't mind commenting on, what the problem looks like and how big of a problem it is as you're talking to farmers, and do they have trust that these products even work, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So I think farmers are really intrigued by the space, right? I think it's rare to find a farmer who's not interested in biologicals and microbials and wondering, okay, how can this work on my operation? There's obviously tons of pressure from, efficacy of older products, regulatory concerns, potential chances to improve ROI and performance with new technology. So I think there's a ton of interest. There's also some skepticism, right? I think, frankly, farmers are, want to see the technology works on their farm before adopting it at a wide scale, which I think is very reasonable. One of the reasons why we're really focused on getting data that validates product performance in the real world to really help growers build confidence. But I do think, we've definitely heard farmers, when you're talking about a living product, it's a very different conversation than fertilizer and chemicals that we've used for decades that they're very familiar with. And naturally, one of the questions is, how do I know what I'm getting, right? The units are CFUs or something, right? Farmers aren't sure how to interpret that, right? And if that's real, is that actually going to happen? And I think it's definitely a question we see a lot from growers is, how do I know this product works? But also, how do I know that it's alive and going to have the desired impact that it could have? So from our perspective, I think it's definitely something we hear people talking about, and something that I think the industry needs a better answer to, frankly, rather than just, well, trust us, this is going to work. We need the data, we need the proof, we need the validation that what we're delivering is what we say it is and going to do what we say it's going to do.
Yeah, for sure. Scott, maybe you want to chime in on, do you see shelf life as a problem as these products leave the manufacturing floor? I know you commented earlier that we need to do more to better understand it, but what do you think? Is it a problem?
Yeah, well, my first answer to that is it depends. So the purely scientific answer, it depends. It depends on how well you've designed everything and how well you've worked out the problems and so on and so forth. But largely, you look at the microbial industry, and I'll expand it beyond just crop applications or plant applications, but animal health and so forth, right? There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of need as we start moving away from technologies we used to use to solve problems, and we start moving towards these new technologies that consumers really want. There's a lot of interest. And yet for microbials, often, the feedback from users will be, well, it's a coin flip. It works half the time, or I'm not sure if it works or not. And I can then, if I look in the mirror on something like that, you have to ask questions like, well, did it make it somewhere at the intended dose with the intended activity at the right time, or is the product garbage, right? Is the product just not efficacious? And if you haven't worked out the kinks on shelf life, for example, on stability, then you can't answer that question. Maybe it's both, right? So I think that's probably a major problem in the use of microbials is, separating that question cleanly and troubleshooting it. Is the product not working because it's not efficacious, or it's not working because it's not delivered at the right way, at the right time, under the right stability, and so forth? So it depends. And the really good products, I think, have this worked out. And a lot of the stuff we call foo-foo dust, which gives the whole microbials area a bit of a bad name, maybe doesn't have this worked out as well with shelf life, for example.
For sure. Just maybe a further comment here on shelf life, a big problem. Are all microbes created equal? As you deal with different potential products and development of products, what do you see, and how do you start to evaluate shelf life at the bench? Unmute.
I was so happy hearing the others that I totally forgot. But yeah, well, the problem with the microbes or living organisms is that, well, they're alive, and it is true that they can have these amazing effects. And you see that by having tons of literature about microbes to be applied as biostimulant and biocontrol. And then you see so few in the market. Why? Because it's very hard to stabilize each different microbe with a unique formula. And that's the problem of shelf life. You don't have a unique solution to solve every problem. And even like Scott was saying, and that's the thing that us in Battelle also take in consideration, there is technology that can make your product stable for years. For instance, encapsulation, you can keep it for 10 years if needed. But what is the cost? Sometimes we have to be careful about the technology that the client can use or not. And for that, I think shelf life can be a problem, but it's also related with the investment you want to do in your product, the technology that you want to use, and the conditions you want to cover. And because covering everything, it's hard, but if you can cover different markets, create different wider product range, it's possible. And even with encapsulation, I mean, it's one of our line of research, and it's possible, but you always have to think ahead. So how am I going to scale this? How is it going to be efficient applied to seed or to any other condition? So shelf life is a problem because it's not a single problem. It is linked to everything. And when a client comes to us, for instance, he's not only asking for shelf life. He wants easy handling. He wants a safe product. He wants the product to be applied to different markets. And you have to have everything in consideration to do the formulation. So it's not only about keeping it alive, but giving all the other requirements that the farmer asks to, in this case, to our clients, which are the ones that come to us with a problem. So yeah, I mean, with biologicals, there is no later optimization. You have to optimize the product right away before putting it in the market. If you give bad reputation to biologicals, you are ruining all the other biologicals. So, I mean, there is very good products in the market, and you don't want to destroy all the hard work that these companies had in investing in their technologies and in the quality of their products.
Yep. And this goes right into thinking about solutions. So we'll start to work on the next kind of stage of our discussion here. And you all agree that it's challenging to create living microbe products, and that shelf life, there are issues with these products. What are some of the solutions? And Inish, maybe we can just kind of piggyback on some of the things you've been talking about. Encapsulation, you do have to consider the end use and so forth, but are there any other tricks up a bioformulationist's sleeve that we should know about here? And it's just between us here, right? Like, how do you start to approach strategies for these types of products?
Well, in the case of our internal research, for instance, we mainly use it in the sense that we want to understand the problems that our clients have before they even tell us about them, like already try to guess what, if my client is trying to do this, what kind of problems he will face. And of course, we always come to the prolonging the microbial shelf life, or especially, for instance, for seed treatment, which is now a growing market for biologicals, improving the survivability on the seed. So in our case, our tricks, they are kind of reserved to our client-based work, but I think in our sense is really investing in our own internal research as well, to ourselves to understand the problem and know how to solve them, because it's crucial if you want to help someone to already know how to solve them. So, for instance, at this moment, we have different lines of internal research. We are doing some related with seed treatment. So for the microplastics, we are developing different formulations, removing the co-formulants plastic-based, and testing different types of microbes, gram-negatives, gram-positives, which in this case, we have some good results for, like, I started this one, for instance, 12 months, and so far I keep my my viability without any loss at room temperature. Then we also have like encapsulation technologies, alginate bead and non-alginate bead, again, because different clients, different needs, different active ingredients require different technologies. For instance, one of the technologies that's not alginate bead behaves better with some kind of microbes and less better with others, but this doesn't tell you that you should give up. No, the thing of doing bioformulation, I think it's our trick, is you improve. And in our case, I think our strength and best trick of all is to actually have the multidisciplinary team and having a team of microbiologists working alongside with very experienced crop protection chemist formulators that know everything about different materials, what works and not works, and I think that's it. It requires work. It requires you looking for answers. So that's our trick. It's
sure.
Hard work and inspiration, I would say.
There is no school of bioformulation. It is definitely learned at the bench, and I can share the struggle with you as well. I've had to learn on my own as well. Scott, maybe you could comment on if you see any industry trends. We haven't really talked about spore formers versus non-spore formers, or liquids versus dries, but what are you seeing in terms of maybe what some of your customers are coming for and asking for in terms of how these products look? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, Inish, you outlined a lot of the different opportunities for us, technical solutions, and it comes down to choices. And customers make all of those choices, right? They want maybe someone microencapsulated or a liquid form, or using a variety of protection schemes, stabilization schemes, and so forth. And so I don't know that I'd say there's a well, I shouldn't quite put it that way, a clear trend. I mean, some of the trends are around they need a product format that fits with the end use application, right? I mean, dry products for seed coatings or so forth, things like that, right? So ultimately, if there is, it's a choice of what's the end use look like. But I think I'd go beyond that and say that from a manufacturing perspective, and I gave a talk on this about 2 weeks ago as well, is that, in a sense, beware elegant solutions. And when I say beware elegant solutions, I mean those are the ones that maybe when you try and scale them, they maybe don't scale as well at larger scale manufacturing, or it's more complicated, or it's more costly, or something like that. Something that might work really well at a benchtop might not work when you're scaling it to multiple tens of thousands of liters of product that you're trying to process for real industrial application. Now, I'm not trying to throw cold water on any of the work that Inish is doing or anything like that. I'm sure they have that in mind as well. But just in general, right? The more elegant, the more complicated the solution, the harder it becomes and the costlier it becomes to scale up to manufacturing. And then that might just blow your whole cost structure of an end product out of the water. So yeah, there you go. That's my input, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And Matt, anything else you want to add in terms of trends and what the farmer expects, I guess, when they get these products in their hands?
Yeah, I think the prior two answers have probably covered most of the ground, but I definitely do see we have a lot of biological manufacturers who come to us with new technologies looking to get to market, and I definitely over the past year or so, I feel like have noted an increasing tendency to talk about formulation and how they're more working on improvements there, more confident that the product is going to get to the farm in a good shape than before, right? I think a couple of years ago, I think there was a lot of focus just on, hey, this works, let's get it to the farm in whatever capacity we can, right? It may be a formulation that is bulky or has cold chain requirements, whatever it is, but I think we definitely see a lot more focus now on, okay, we've proven that this works a couple of years ago. Now we're working on improving. Okay, maybe it's launching a dry formulation of the same product that is less bulky and can be applied in different methods on the farm and things like that, right? And so I definitely see an increasing discussion about that topic, which I think is definitely a good thing. The farmer expects things to just work, right? You're not going to have a lot of patience for, it's got to be stored like this. It can only be tank mixed with these products. Like, farmers are busy and need things to come in a form where they don't have to have a ton of extra considerations there. So I think farmer expectations for products that are pretty well baked and going to just work off the shelf and not have to worry about a lot of considerations for how do I adapt my practices to make this successful. I think those products are going to be the ones that have the greatest receptivity with at least our members.
Yeah, can I add to
absolutely.
I want to add to that something that I wanted to say is that, I think frequently we get into this innovative space, and the microbial area world is very innovative right now, lots of cool ideas and so forth. But frequently, if we're expecting the customer to change their behavior and adapt to the use of our product, you better go back and rewrite your business plan. If it doesn't look a lot more like what they're already doing, and you're saying, okay, you need to change this and that and the other thing about, how you're planting crops or whatever it may be, it's going to take a whole lot longer to get that product to market and be successful. So keep that in mind as well. Among everything else, you better look more like what they're doing and not less.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess along those lines, do you see that the practices in place at the farm level are sufficient for use of these living products? And I say that kind of keeping maybe with two things in mind. Historically, one of the solutions has been cold chain, right? So is that reasonable to expect that that should continue to be a solution? And then the equipment that's being used to deliver these products, is it sufficient, whether it's seed treatment equipment or other means for delivery, like in furrow or in nutrient solutions, et cetera? And I'll let anybody take this one. We're going off script right now.
Yeah, if I can, I'd say short answer is there's a lot of gaps, right? I think we add a lot of heat to whatever processing, and heat tends to go in the wrong direction, or we're doing liquid suspensions of things, adding a lot of water activity to bacteria that might not like all that water activity, things like that. So I guess I'd say there's still a lot of gaps between what makes a great product and the industry practices that make it applied well.
Well, I actually would like to add something, but to the previous comments. The things with biologicals is that they are not the same as chemicals. So although it would be great to have a product working in the same way as a chemical, you have to be realistic. And I'm not talking again here in the sense of the cold chain, for instance, because you can prevent that by improving your formulation to either be a dry product or not going into that details. But the thing is, I do think informing the farmers could be important, because biologicals also will require a different type of application idea. So because they won't survive in the same way as a chemical if you don't respect how the label, if the label says something and we are not following what is written in the label, it's a living microbe. So it's hard that as much good formulation you do, you still need to follow the rules to have a good result from that. And the thing with the biologicals is not because it's greener. In some cases, some pests, some diseases, the only product that is working right now is actually biological. And this is what is important to also put out there, is that biological can be a great product. That's why formulation, it's important. Scalability, for sure. I don't see how you can create a good product and then you cannot scale it up, because, well, if you want to sell it, if you want to reach all the farmers, of course you will have to. But I do think informing farmers that biological is different from a chemical, it's normal, but it's not bad. It could be very good, because it could change different things in agriculture. Because agriculture also is an improving market in sense of that we can put it more efficient. We can use less input and put it more efficient. But anyway, this is about shelf life, and I just wanted to say my opinion about the biologicals versus the chemicals.
Yeah, well put. Look, I'm with you 100% there as well. So well put, yes.
Yeah, and historically, with biological, we're putting them into a chemical supply chain, right? Which is where some of these issues of shelf life really start to come out. But, some of the thoughts are, well, we handle seed differently now, right? Because it is such an investment by the farmer. Are some of the things that we do to preserve the seed sufficient for biological products in their handling and in the distribution and in the channel? Matt, maybe you have a comment there and kind of how you guys are handling some of these products. And you have a different model, direct to farmer. Maybe you have something you could comment there on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I think from just to build on some of the prior comments as well, right? I think there definitely are, everyone expects, I think, that there are going to be differences in applying biologicals. And I think what's important from the retailer perspective is knowing what guidance can we give growers about each product, right? Like we want to make sure that we're only selling products to growers who are going to have the equipment and the practices and the patience and everything else to make them successful, right? It's no use for us to just sell the product and then the farmer is not set up to use it in a way where it's going to work. I mean, that's maybe a one-time sale, but that's not what we're looking to do, right? We want growers to have a great experience and come back and want to explore the space more. So from our perspective, I think it's really, really critical that whatever those conditions are, like, hey, this can only be applied with this type of equipment. It has to be applied alone, or it can only be take mixed with XYZ products, or it has to be stored on the farm in certain conditions. We can work through some of those. We need to know what they are, right? And just knowing that they matter isn't enough, right? We need to know, okay, this product can take mix with this, but it can't take mix with this. This product has to be stored this way. This other one doesn't matter. And I think from our perspective, it's probably been difficult to know that with some products on the market, exactly what those stipulations are. But the more we know, the more we can then proactively go to the growers we're talking to and make sure we're positioning those products in the places that they're going to be successful. And on the other hand, I do think the products that have the least asterisks there of what you need to do to make them work are going to be massively more successful than the ones that maybe scientifically and technologically work better, but have 5-10 different conditions that have to be met in order for them to work. Because running a farm is an extremely difficult job. It's hectic, it's chaotic, right? Farmers are very practical, very focused on profitability. So they're willing to jump through hoops and do something new if they need to. But at the same time, when the rubber hits the road and you're rushing to plant in 2 days before a storm comes, practicality trumps everything, right? And knowing like, oh, actually I have to make a separate pass for this, or I have to store this product in a unique way. It doesn't rule out everybody, but it is a big limiter to how many people can adopt it. So to the extent that, as an industry, we can move to having formulations that are much more amenable to what realistically are often harsh and unpredictable, practical realities of running a farm, I think that's going to be a really good thing for the adoption of these products.
Yeah, for sure. And knowing that farmers use so many different inputs, if you think about what a biological could be delivered with, and equipment-wise and solution-wise, different chemistries and so forth, do you think because there are so many ways it could be done that we need to limit, for it on the label, really limit how and with what these products can be delivered to make it easy and to ensure that they work? Or do you think that might be a turnoff by a farmer because now you're telling them they can only use this product in a couple of different ways? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's better to be upfront about it, right? If you know that, look, this product is going to work best under these conditions, in my view, it's much better to be very open and upfront about that on the label and through the agronomist or retailer or digital portal or whatever combination thereof where the farmer is purchasing the product. I don't think it does us any favors if we're sort of vague on that and let the Wild West take over. People apply it in 20 different ways, and some of them don't work. I think that hurts in the long run. But to the extent that there are products that can mix with other applications already being made to the field, that's a huge benefit to the grower. I think there certainly are growers who are willing to make an extra separate application for a standalone product, but that has costs, right? It has time, labor, fuel, compaction of the field. Maybe you're knocking over part of the crop if it's a foliar application in season, and time and hassle, right? It's not that it's no non-starter, but it had the ROI has got to be even more powerful to convince a grower to do that and to negate for some of the negative side effects that do occur there. So if there's any way products that can go on the seed, tank mix with fertilizer, with chemicals, much smoother path to adoption in our view.
Sure.
Actually,
go ahead.
Sorry, Jane. I was going to add, like, I totally agree with that. Like, one of our lines of research is also like achieving compatibility with different active ingredients on seed. And I do agree that the path is to put the product better. When I said that the product was different, it doesn't mean that it cannot be applied to a different range of situations, or even with chemicals. I mean, depending on the active ingredient, that process can be quite straightforward. Of course, not to everything, but I do agree being honest with the label is crucial, but also know what kind of investment you want to do it to your formulation, and have the balance of the cost, but also the gains from it. Because again, for instance, the active ingredients we are testing is based on encapsulation, but if you can't have two products in one, wouldn't that be an advantage? So it's always be very clear of what the final intentions are and what kind of product I want, and then the applications also that it will be, and the markets where it will be sold. But it is possible to improve, and that's the way with the biologicals. It's, to be honest, biologicals, although they are here for long, because it's not new, biologicals, it's now that there is some attention to it, to actually put people thinking we need to invest in good technology, we need to invest in creating good products that can fulfill the needs for the farmers. So it's now, it's the time that we have to actually improve our biologicals in every sense, that they will be a preference also.
And this is a great...
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly add to that and say you're spot on. We've hit some kind of tipping point or critical mass in the industry of demand and so forth that a lot more people are interested. And really, it's our job on the innovation side, right? The manufacturing and innovation side and so forth. It's our job to make these more accessible, break down restrictions, break down barriers with better technology. It still costs the right cost it needs to and so forth. But we're all working on that very hard to break down those restrictions and barriers to make these more widely usable by everybody.
So great segue, Scott. So our last segment is talking about what we can learn from other industries and innovation. So maybe we can start with you, Scott. And Phibro works across multiple industries. Yeah. You've seen innovation from a lot of different perspectives. What do you think is going to make a difference to help? We are at a tipping point of need, but what's going to help us get over this hump here?
Yeah, great. It is a very good question. I have seen a lot of different technologies that we can, as Inish says, improve the shelf life of these things indefinitely, or improve the different areas that we can use them and so forth, but it ultimately comes down to cost. And so, of course, there's a lot of innovation in manufacturing to scale these things up at the right price point, or scale in general, right? So maybe it's a technology that's being used on the human side to prepare active ingredients that suddenly becomes of the right scale that we can borrow in a manufacturing platform for agriculture, such that it hits the right price point, as well as delivering the improved shelf life and accuracy. So I see a lot of those technologies. I think we're still very much in the early stage because it has to do with price. So the kind of stuff that needs to happen, right? Microencapsulation systems or alternatives to microencapsulation or liquid stabilization and so forth, their prices are coming down. And as their prices come down, they become more accessible for use in these kinds of environments. So they're coming. It's still early. Ultimately, I think it's still early for a lot of the really cool stuff to be widely used at a really large scale. But we'll get there. I have no doubt that we're going to get there.
What's going to help us get there then? Maybe that's another. Is it what's holding? What are the barriers maybe too to getting there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, it does come down to price, right? It comes down to the price of the application because, farmers are only going to pay so much per acre of treatment or per seed or per chicken or per cow. And they've got a lot of different alternatives they can use. And it has to come down to price first, because all of our customers are very price conscious, and then you can start looking at ROI and price flexibility and so forth. But they always think price first too. These are farmers, right? They think price first.
That's not going to change.
Yeah.
Sure, Matt, anything you want to comment on the innovation side? What some of the things you're seeing?
Well, for me, the innovation side comes always with the research. Like I have been saying, I do agree with everything that Scott says, because even when we are trying to develop a new formulation, or even like our different lines of research, they tend to kind of be, am I creating a formulation that can easily be put in place in the market or not? But what we try to do is to have different alternatives. So create different lines covering different topics that we consider that are important. And in case of Battelle, because we also, fortunately, we have different areas to cover, because we also work in pharmaceutical, environment, defense. So all that knowledge from other areas can be applied. I used to work with environmental biotechnology. So of course, I always understand that biologicals in general, they are applied as a biotechnology. So they require you stabilizing the bio, but using a technology that it is reachable. So I think for us, the very important thing is to actually have an holistic perspective. So it's not only about biologicals, but what kind of synergies you can create, research, collaboration, quality, and being honest about what the product can and cannot do. And if you cannot do that, then we just need to get a way to make it do it, or try to at least. But I think the innovation is always in research, is always in you having your team. And to be honest, I love that part, because I have a good team where it's very fun to, like Scott was saying, that yeah, the cool stuff. I'm always in a meeting with my colleagues. It's like, oh, it would be so cool to do this and this and they're like, but maybe we couldn't scale that up. And I think having this brainstorm is always important, because even if now you cannot do or use the cool stuff, there will be a time for the cool stuff to come. And I think you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, where these other industries are doing things maybe at different cost points, but there are things that we can learn, certainly. And biotechnology is driving forward advancements with the microbes through either synthetic biology approaches or, other means as we're learning more and more. Matt, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on the innovation side. We do have some questions starting to appear in our chat box. In the Q&A box there, so we can move on to them. And I actually have a good one here, something I wanted to ask, and it has to do with expired product. And the question in the chat box, if Scott or Matt can address how products that have expired are handled in business. How big of a problem is this in our distribution channels? And what can we do to improve so that we're not losing so much product that expires with its shelf life. So maybe Matt, maybe you can start with that since you see it in your business directly.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, expired products wouldn't be delivered to the farm, right? They're not useful anymore. So, it's certainly a firm line in the sand there that anything that's expired can't be sold, period. I think the scale of the problem, I think, definitely depends on the product. There's some that have much longer expiration periods and shelf stability than others. So I think I definitely think it is an issue, though. We have, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it has been a non-trivial, concern for certain microbial products in managing the supply chain, and it, affects the from the perspective of a distributor. People are thinking about a lot of competing priorities, right? Crop protection, seed, fertilizer, biologicals, livestock products, a lot of different stuff to focus on, and you're competing for mind share of your sales team, of your warehouse space, right? Of all these different things, and products that add a lot of complexity in terms of, well, this is only going to last for 8 months or a year, whatever it is. It doesn't mean they can't be done by any means, but it's a knock against them in terms of where they're going to rank versus the internal competition for how much mind share they get from the sales and logistics organizations. So I definitely think it's a concern. I think we've talked about some of the great work going on to help alleviate that in the future, which we're excited about.
For sure. We're kind of entering into the last segment here where Q&A. We were planning on having a live Q&A. So I'm going to ask some of the questions that are popping up in the chat box and or the Q&A box. And please feel free for our attendees here live to put a question there. One of the first questions I see numerous biological products with many different species. So we call these consortia, many different species in the product. How do we know if the species are synergistic or antagonistic in the product? More species may be less effective than fewer. Example, Bacillus, Streptomyces, Trichoderma in the same product. Yeah, so this is an ongoing debate, not as much related to shelf life, but it certainly does factor into different products that are on the market and being able to maintain a consistent product over time from the manufacturer to the farm gate. I don't know if anybody wants, from their experience, to comment on this.
Jane, could I? Sorry, Anish, I'd love to chip in on the last question and then
Sure.
Yeah.
There's no rules here, Scott. We're good.
Right, on the expired product one, look, I'd like to say that the really good manufacturers, I think, are thinking about this and putting in the right thinking right up front. I mean, when we're talking about expiration dates, we're saying we're not going to put a product out in the market that doesn't have a 2-year shelf life for manufacture. And we do lots of testing under a lot of different environmental conditions and all kinds of processes there to make sure that, we're putting a product out in the marketplace that'll make it through that long supply chain, that long path to market and still arrive to the customer with plenty of shelf life. So, you try and do what you can to avoid expired product and handling of expired product before it ever leaves your door. But then ultimately, what do we do with expired product? I mean, if it's expired and the activity isn't there, you've got to take it back and destroy it and do the right thing for the market and the customer as well. Yeah,
good points. I mean, you mentioned 2 years. Do you consider that in the industry as a gold standard, or are we really achieving that, and does that limit the types of microbes that can be commercialized?
Yeah, so number one, it limits the types of microbes. Number two, we're probably not achieving it everywhere. And the fact is that there's a lot fewer products in the marketplace if you hold yourself to a 2-year standard. And I think we're holding ourselves to that standard, or trying to, because, beyond that, everything else becomes unfeasible. You can't get it from your manufacturing site to the customer in the field for, if you will, in 6 months. It's just not going to happen, especially if you're going outside the U.S. So So I would call 2 years maybe a standard or maybe a minimum. And anything less than that, a lot of other things become hard. And there's probably a lot fewer products in the marketplace because you set a standard like that.
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up a good point from a manufacturer's standpoint. The logistics involved in timing as you're hitting different markets. Clearly in the US, North America, when corn and beans are getting planted, it's a very narrow window compared to other markets around the world. So as a manufacturer, if I put 2 and 2 together and what you just said, it limits the microbes because you need that shelf life so that you can maintain your supply chain, your logistics. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then the consortia question.
This consortia question, it's always a good one.
Inish is anxious to get in this one, so I'm going
to... No. Please, Scott, go ahead.
Right. So bottom line, I think consortia like this are important. Multiple modes of action are critical. These things can, if designed right, if selected right, and if the right research is done, you can demonstrate compatibility and synergy between them that I think really starts to differentiate the value you get out of microbials than the value you might get out of, traditional chemicals and so forth.
Very good.
Well, I would agree with Scott's. Consortias can be good. The thing is, you do need to select what you put together, and also be aware that when you put it in the field, it also depends. So the consortias, when you design one, it also depends on the purpose of the consortia, because again, putting different microbes for a biostimulant effect is different from putting different microbes to a biocontrol effect. And then it's a matter of do I need to prove which microbe is doing what, or it just matters that, because the thing with the consortia is, again, the environment where you apply, the conditions where you apply, they can change that consortia. So the hard part here is to know actually what was promoted instead of the other thing, because they can be synergetic, but sometimes in certain conditions, then they overcome one another, or so consortias are complex because of that. Again, it's living microbes living together and having different kind of actions. So of course one can have a more positive effect on the growth, but other in capturing some kind of specific nutrient. So it depends on what you put together, but that has to be planned ahead. And even in a shelf life perspective, you have to think how you are going to study that correctly, because imagine, you can have the same species but different strains. How are you going to monitorize who is what's the level of each one? So depends again of the investment you want to have on your product, because a consortia, you have to have other considerations, and even in a product when you are formulating the shelf life itself. It depends what type of product you want. If you are comparing with a plant protection product where you take in consideration all the surfactants or all the co-formulants that you put, surfactants or adjuvants, is different from you stabilizing your microorganism itself. You can stabilize your microorganism for 2 years and then you apply it. But the thing is, apply your microorganism to a foliar treatment without putting something to help spreading it and staying in the leaf. Yep. I mean, again, this is a whole perspective when you design a formulation that you need to consider.
For sure. And I'm going to move on to another question because I think it dovetails this nicely in thinking about, we haven't really talked about dry formulations versus liquids too much, but there's obviously different, when you put the cells into a dormant state in a dry formulation, there's shelf life advantages gained there, right? But it requires additional processing, et cetera. Where do you think we are as an industry? And can we say dry formulations better period for shelf life? Do we need liquid formulation because it's easier to use by our end users? What can we say about this?
Is it me or is it Scott?
Dry versus liquid.
Scott, you want to go first or should I go?
Oh my, yeah. Look, we need both. I think we need both because the kind of applications we have are different and we need to be adaptable to both. But yeah, these are all the relevant technical questions of how do you get it there? How do you get it active? How do you have it in the place that you want it and doing the job that you want it to do and with the right metabolism and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, that would be, boy, that would be, if not another seminar or another webinar, a whole college class or something. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. But ultimately, yeah, we need both because we have different application circumstances.
Yeah,
Right,
I do agree. And I think there is no perfect formulation type or formulation recipe.
Yeah.
So it really depends of your because again, if you have spores, to be honest, being liquid or dry formulation maybe won't matter so much. So, but even if we are talking gram negatives, which I know that most of people are afraid of, you can still have it. One of our lines of research, I'm currently on 18 months stability with a gram negative at room temperature. It sometimes, again, you also need luck to get it right. But it depends of your active ingredient, and it depends of what the client can use or not. Again, equipment is important, what he can do on his own to scale the product. So there is no, oh, dry are the best ones or liquids are the best ones. We need both. We need to be studying both, and we need to create good solution for both.
Okay. Very good. You guys have just made my mind blow up here with all of this discussion and maybe good job security for all of us, right? It is a very challenging area of study as we're working with these living products and trying to get them commercialized into market. We have a few minutes left. We've covered pretty much most of the topics that were brought up in the Q&A. I do want to just wrap up here so that we're good with an interest of time and good with completing here by 1 o'clock. And maybe just each of you as we sign out can have any parting thoughts on, you know, how we can truly fulfill the promise of ag biologicals, what that means to you. I know we've covered a lot of ground over the last hour. So, you know, what do you think is most important for us to, you know, for the farmers to trust these products? Whoever wants to go first. Or whoever wants the last word, right? Depending on how you look at it. You know, you want to go first?
No, I was going to give to Matt.
Okay, sure. Happy to go first. Thanks. Yeah, I think from my perspective, what is most critical, I think, to fulfill what I think we all believe is a really big opportunity and growing rapidly and will increasingly become dominant over the next years and decades is really to have really solid data on how products work in the real world, right? I think there's a lot of data from lab studies, greenhouse studies, small plot research. All of that is critical, right? It's very, very important to have that, but it's often not enough in our experience, at least, to get farmer adoption, right? I think from our view, getting data on, look, this worked in the lab, this worked in the greenhouse, this worked in small plot trials. Okay, now how does it work when it's take mixed with all these other products, when it's applied with real grower equipment, when there's real field variation, when there's real stuff that goes wrong, there's real practical considerations of how it gets applied on the farm. Getting the data that proves that it also works there is really, really, really crucial for our point in the industry, which is, interfacing directly with growers and helping them understand that the product is going to work and positioned in the right place, right? It's not just a yes or no, does it work? It's what are the conditions where it works best? And you need a ton of data to resolve those patterns. And that I think has a huge positive impact on adoption when we have that scale of data.
Absolutely. Reducing it to practice every time. All right, Scott, you want to comment here on what you see? Any parting thoughts?
No, I agree, right? In every industry that I work with microbials, it's data, it's proof, and then all of that relates to, it's a good bet, right? I'm betting my money on a technology, and this is one that I can spend my money on and I'll get a consistent return. And as soon as a farmer sees that and really feels that, they'll switch all their business practices over. They might be conservative, but they're also willing to place good bets.
Yeah, I think it's a good bet with these products, but we definitely have to reduce it to practice and have ROI for the farmer. Munish, anything else in parting thoughts on how we can fulfill the promise of ag biologicals?
No, I mean, I think they pretty much cover all. I do agree. I myself, I did greenhouse field trials. I worked with national institutes, industry. So it is important to be covering all the angles so we can, again, doing all the hard work with a bit of inspiration in every point of it. But yes, prove that it works and be honest about how it works. So definitely if the farmer knows, okay, it works with this, but don't try to use this with that pest because it won't do any effect. So it's maintaining things clear so we are not promising something that we cannot fulfill and then ruining all the image for biologicals in general. But yes, I think they said already everything. So
yeah, definitely. And I'd add on to it, we need to continue to innovate. We need to continue to collaborate. So I thank each of you for your time today. I really do appreciate you taking time. It was a great discussion. And for those that are still hanging on, participants, thank you for joining us. And we will have another webinar at some point, so stay tuned. We will figure out the topic and start to socialize the next webinar in fulfilling the promise of ag biologicals. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
thank
Jay.
you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.